Here at Wessler, and I'm glad you joined us. We have a great presentation today on Globally Harmonized System of Classification and Labeling of Chemicals, presented by Amy Harville. Amy is our environmental scientist, and she has more than 15 years experience in the field. We encourage you to ask questions today. If you could just use the question box in the GoToWebinar control panel, that would be great. With that, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Amy now.
Thank you, Kathy. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining Wessler's webinar this morning on GHS with the focus on the changes to the labels and the safety data sheets portion of the Hazard Communication Program. Before we get started, the webinar invitation included some supplemental information that we'll be referring to throughout the program, so you might want to have that available. The supplemental information included an example label, a sheet of pictograms, and the format for the safety data sheets, all of which are available on OSHA's website. If you're using the webinar to train several employees, you'll want to make sure that you use an attendance sheet to document the training, or Wessler will be providing certificates of completion after the webinar is completed. So why was GHS implemented? GHS was implemented to provide a common classification of chemicals that will be used worldwide to deliver a common communication of the hazards on the labels and the MSDSs. The GHS will improve the quality and consistency of hazard information in the workplace and to provide a safer work environment for employees. The GHS will easily provide understandable information on chemicals, their handling, and safe use practices. GHS will reduce trade barriers and help American businesses provide cost savings in several administrative ways. December training requirements. As part of the new GHS requirements that have been incorporated into the Hazard Communication Program, one of these is the requirement to train your employees by December 1st. The training is to include labeling, to review the product name identifiers, signal words, pictograms, and the hazard and precautionary statements. The training will also is required to review safety data sheets, the new format, and some specific section information. GHS elements. One of the things that GHS did is to classify and categorize the chemicals. The classification criteria are grouped by 3 categories, and these are physical hazards, health hazards, and environmental hazard categories. The physical hazard category is the one that's basically be the chemicals that are going to damage your body or threaten your safety. These include chemicals categorized as explosives, flammables, oxidizers, self-reactive chemicals, pyrophorics, self-heating chemicals, organic peroxides, gases under pressure, chemicals that are going to emit gases when in contact with water, corrosives, and combustible dust. And I'll explain a little bit later in the presentation some more details that define these categories. The health hazard categories include those that may adversely affect your health. I like to think of these as ones that are going to take a little bit longer. They're not going to be as instantaneous as the physical hazards. So this category includes acute toxicity, skin corrosion or irritation, chemicals that can cause eye damage, respiratory or skin sensitization, germ cell mutagenicity, carcinogens, reproductive toxicology, specific target organ toxicity, and aspiration toxicity. The environmental hazard category, these are ones that are going to threaten the aquatic environment. These include acute or immediate toxicity, and this is going to include things such as fish kills. It also includes chronic or long-term toxic effects, and this is going to be both bioaccumulation and degradability. Bioaccumulation is the reason we have fish consumption advisories, and what happens is over time fish will accumulate certain contaminants in their bodies and they have no way to get rid of them. So when humans then consume fish, that accumulation in their body of contaminants can harm us. So the fish consumption advisory basically tells you by what county, fish, the amount, and how often you can eat certain types of fish. The degradability, the rapid degradability, basically is how fast or how easy the chemical will degrade in the environment over time. While the first GHS element was to classify the hazards, the second element is how to communicate these hazards. And we're going to communicate this through labels and safety data sheets. Labeling. As you can see on this slide, we provided a OSHA sample label that's on their website. This is also included in the supplemental information that was provided to you. The main thing to understand is starting in December 1st, 2015, the labels must include all the information you see on this sample. The information will be provided by the chemical manufacturer. One thing to understand is while GHS is making manufacturers have these labels, they are not standardizing the format of the labels. So when you receive chemicals with the GHS labels, they may not look exactly like this. They could be in a different format. Product identifiers and supplier identification. Basically, the name of the product is simply put is the what is it and who is it from for the chemical. Hazard pictograms. The pictograms are all new to HAZCOM, but they're going to be very similar to what you have seen on DOT shipping labels. So some of these labels in the picture in the slide you already see on your chemicals because they are required to be there for DOT shipping. Pictograms are basically standardized symbols intended to convey very specific information. Now we're going to go through each pictogram. So if you have the supplemental information, there was a sheet that provided all the pictograms together if you want to refer to that. The first one are oxidizers. An oxidizing agent is not necessarily combustible by itself, but because it yields oxygen, it may cause another material to combust. And some examples of these are hydrogen peroxide, sodium hypochlorite, which is also kind of known as bleach, and potassium permanganate. And these chemicals are going to be identified with the pictogram of a flame over the circle. And this is the same picture you will have for a DOT oxidizer label. The next pictogram is of an exploding bomb. And so, of course, explosives are going to be under this pictogram. Another chemical are self-reactives, and self-reactives have the potential to polymerize, decompose, or condense under certain conditions like shock, pressure, light, temperature. Those type of conditions can make this chemical reactive. The other one is organic peroxides. An example of this is methyl ethyl ketone peroxide, and this is a chemical that is used in the manufacture of polyesters and fiberglass reinforced plastic. The pictogram of a flame is for flammables, and this is going to include gases, liquids, and solids. And GHS has divided flammables into 4 categories by severity. But basically, if the chemical has a flash point of less than 200 degrees Fahrenheit, it's going to be considered flammable. Self-reactants, we just discussed. Pyrophorics are those chemicals that will spontaneously ignite in air or produce sparks by friction. Self-heating chemicals, those are kind of self-explanatory. They're going to heat by reacting with air. There's also chemicals that are going to can emit a flammable gas, other organic peroxides, and some examples of flammables would be gasoline and acetone. Also, if you are looking for some more information on the type of chemicals we are describing here, I have found that the University of Nebraska has a very good website and some standard operating procedures that kind of explain what the different chemicals are and the risks associated with them. If you want, you can go to their website at ehs.unl.edu. There's some tabs across the top, and if you click on the one that says Safe Operating Procedures, you will have go to a menu of items and click on the chemical safety link, and it'll show you a bunch of procedures for the chemicals we have identified. Again, that's ehs.unl.edu. The next pictogram, as usual, the skull and bones indicates a poison or something that's going to be immediately toxic to your health. Some examples of these are antifreeze, sodium cyanide, or strychnine. The corrosive pictogram is the same as the DOT placard, and this is the one that shows the test tubes burning the hand and the piece of metal. Corrosives are going to include both acids and bases, and some examples are sodium hydroxide, which is also called caustic soda, sulfuric acid, and sodium hypochlorite. The pictogram of a gas cylinder basically categorizes items or gases under pressure. And these are going to include, of course, the cylinders, but also liquefied or refrigerated gases in bulk storage tanks. Some examples of these are acetylene, which is used for welding. Oxygen, this could also be medical oxygen. And then chlorine gas, which can be used in water and wastewater treatment. The health hazard pictogram is of a person with this star-like opening in the middle of their chest. These are going to include chemicals that are carcinogens or cancer-causing, respiratory sensitizers, and these chemicals cause hypersensitivity the airways by inhaling a chemical or the fumes of a chemical. Reproductive toxics, these basically cause irreversible damage to fetuses. Target organ toxicity, these chemicals have a toxic effect specific to only 1 or 2 organs, like a kidney or the liver. Mutagenicity, these cause genetic changes in cells. Aspiration toxicity, these chemicals will cause a severe effect from chemical entry into the oral or nasal cavities. Some examples of these are radon, benzene, and formaldehyde. Environmental toxicity, as we discussed under the environmental hazard categories, this is going to include bioaccumulation and degradability. And these, the environmental hazards or the environmental toxics will be indicated by the pictogram of a dead fish and a dead tree. the last pictogram is the exclamation mark. And these exclamation mark I kind of think of as the catch-all. These are going to include irritants, dermal sensitizers, something that's going to cause like an inflammation to your skin or an itchiness, chemicals that cause narcotic effects or effects to the respiratory tract, and other acute or less harmful effects. So signal words. If you refer back to the sample label, you will see a section for signal words under the pictograms. And these are very basic. There's only 2 of them, danger and warning. And these are going to indicate the severity of the hazard. Well, danger is going to be is extremely severe. Warning is going to be less severe. Now, not all chemicals are going to have a danger or warning, a signal word on it. So like something like hand soap is not going to be hazardous to your health because you're putting it on your skin anyway, so there's not going to be a signal word on the label for that chemical. The new labels will also include hazard statements, and these are standardized and assigned by the classification. So if you have a poisonous material, you're going to have the hazard statement, fatal if swallowed, on your label. If you have a solvent, you're going to have the statement, highly flammable liquid and vapor. And these are going to be the hazards you should initially concern yourself with for each chemical. Now, while the hazard statements provide the most important hazards of a chemical, the precautionary statements are going to provide some more supplemental information that's going to be to help protect your safety or minimize some of the effects. So this is going to be some items like PPE, so wear protective gloves, or may cause severe irritation or chemical burns. And both the precautionary and hazard statements are provided by the manufacturer. Secondary containers. Now, secondary containers are going to be those small containers you use in your day-to-day work. So instead of using chemicals directly from a drum or a tote, you transfer them into the small container that's more mobile for you. The good news is you do not have to put a GHS label on these small containers. They're giving you alternative methods to do this. So you can, say you have a group of people that work with one particular chemical. You can put a sign up in the area that provides its name and pictograms and maybe the hazard statements, and it covers the whole area. You can also maybe mark on the container the name and the hazards. You can do this with a grease pen or a permanent marker. Otherwise, you can use your current labeling system, whether it's HMIS or NFPA. You can use those to make sure everyone understands what is in this container. The main reason for this is to make sure people, two different people aren't using the same container but putting different chemicals in it. So additionally, if you have bulk chemical tanks, you're going to want to consider updating all those labels on those tanks. With the new MSDS and labels coming in, your employees don't want to get confused between the old labels you may be using and the new ones they're seeing on the SDSs. So it would probably be a good idea to make sure you update any bulk container labeling. The second part of the communication element are the safety data sheets. Now, SDSs are the same thing as MSDSs. They just dropped the M for some reason. The only thing that GHS did was to standardize the format. They said, you now have to follow this order and nothing else. The SDSs are going to provide the same information as your MSDSs and used in the same way by providing some chemical management recommendations. They're going to give you safety and health precautions. And of course, you're going to be able to use these the same way as MSDSs with help developing your hands-on program and in training your employees. The important thing to know about the SDSs is you must have your MSDSs converted to SDSs by June 1st, 2016. The new SDS standardized format has 16 sections. So we are going to go through these 16 sections. And in the supplemental information, there was the OSHA format, basically the GHS format for the safety data sheets if you would like to go through and follow along. It has detailed information, but we're going to hit some of the highlights for those. So the first one, section 1, is identification. It's going to include the what is it, who made it, and who do I contact. Section 2 is the hazard identification, and this is where all the new stuff comes into play. So your signal words, your hazard statements, the pictograms, and the precautionary statements are all going to be in section 2. Section 3 is the basic chemical breakdown. Section 4 are the, sorry about that. Section 4 are the first aid measures. And this is basically going to be what should be done for like an initial responder. What should they do in the event you were exposed to this chemical? Section 5, firefighting measures. And this is going to provide recommendations on the type of equipment to use in the event of a fire. Section 6, accidental release measures. And this is going to be their recommendations on the best way to clean up a spill of the chemical. Section 7, handling and storage. This is basically the handling practices, the conditions for the safe storage of the chemical, and possibly some precautions on chemical incompatibility. Section 8, exposure controls and personal protection. These are going to be the measures to prevent an illness or prevent injury from exposure. And this is also where you're going to get the recommendations for the personal protective equipment or the PPE you should use. Section 9, physical and chemical properties. This is going to be the basic properties of chemicals. So the pH, the flammability, the density, and a bunch of other items are going to be in this section. Section 10 is stability and reactivity. And this is basically what the chemical will react with. So what other chemicals could react with this one. Section 11, toxicological information. This is basically describes the health effects and the routes of exposure. Section 12, ecological information. And this is how the chemical has affected the environment. Some chemicals may have information on tests completed, others may not. Section 13, disposal considerations. So when this chemical becomes a waste, they're going to have recommendations on how you should properly dispose of it in Section 13. Section 14 is transport information. And this is going to give you the DOT shipping names, the proper placards, and the proper labels to ship your chemical. Section 15 is regulatory information. And this is going to be some of the other rules and regulations that could apply to that chemical based on its chemical breakdown. Section 16, other information. This is basically who prepared the MSDS and what revision it is, or when the last revision occurred to it. Now, sections 12 through 15 while they are required to be a part of the new GHS SDS, are not mandatory by OSHA. And the reason they did this is because they have no control over that information. The disposal, the transport information, even the environmental regulatory information is all controlled by outside agencies. So whether it is DOT or EPA or disposal, that's all under RITRA. So they have no control of it, so they decided not to make it mandatory. In conclusion, after this training, your employees should be able to recognize the new labels and the pictograms. So during this transition period, they understand the new information they are getting. They should be able be familiar with the new SDS format and be knowledgeable on where to find the information on the safety data sheet. So that concludes the presentation. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Amy, so much. This is Kathy again. Thanks, Amy, so much for a great presentation. We actually do have some questions coming in. Rick has a question. All employees need to be trained, or just those who actually work with the materials?
It's going to be the employees that are exposed to the chemicals. So if you have people, say, in a maintenance shop that are using maybe oils on a regular basis, they should be trained. The people that work in an office do not necessarily need to be trained on those oils because they are not exposed to them. Does that answer your question?
Looks like we have another question. It's Ted wants you to repeat. Let me hold on here. Ted wants you to repeat, Amy, the U of N web address.
Oh, yes. It is, I'll find it for you here, ehs.unl.edu.
Amy, is that EH, is that S as in Sam?
It's Environmental, Health, and Safety, EHS.
Okay. Gail actually had a question. She wanted to know, do I have to have an SDS for commercial products like glass cleaner or hand soap?
No, you do not. As long as your employees are using it for its intended use, you're using glass cleaner as glass cleaner, you do not have to have an MSDS for it. Now, say you have a janitorial staff and the person may be exposed to glass cleaners or other types of cleaners more often than what is typical, then yes, I would recommend having SDS on site for those commercial products.
Here's another question, Amy. Brenda wants to know, what about toner from printers? Does that qualify for an SDS sheet?
If you were physically handling the ink, most toners come in like a plastic package. I would say no. If you are, maybe you're a Xerox representative and you're doing that all day long, then yes, you would.
Okay, Rick had a question. Who are considered to be exposed? For example, if we are spreading weed killers at a site, would all employees at that site be considered to be exposed?
I think it'd be how often you applied it. If you're applying it once a year, then I would probably not have one. If you are applying it every couple of weeks, I probably would. But saying that, I have been in facilities where, because of the smell of some of the pesticides and applications, people get anxious about it. So really, you should probably just have one on site, just in case someone does ask about that chemical.
Ryan wants to know, where did you recommend we look once we get on the Nebraska website?
There should be a couple of tabs at the top. I think one towards the right says Safe Operating Procedures. If you click on that, it will show you a box, a menu box, and towards the left, about halfway down, there's one that says Chemical Safety. If you click on that, it'll take you to the procedures. So I think there's one for self-reactive chemicals, there's one for flammables, there may be a procedure also for oxidizers.
Ron had a question. Do I have to determine the pictograms and hazard statements for each chemical?
No, you don't. All of that is done by the manufacturer. And they have to run tests, they have to do all this stuff to put it into the labels and the SDSs. You get all your information from those labels and SDSs. The only thing you need to do is to ensure, like, your bulk chemical containers, the labeling on that is updated to the new pictograms and statements.
Okay, we have more questions coming in. Brian Klein with Greentown Wastewater. How do I get the certificates for my employees?
I believe Monday we are going to be sending out a follow-up email that will have the certificates of completion in that.
Roger wants to know, will the manufacturer also furnish the SDSs?
Manufacturers, from what I've seen in my experience, SDSs are provided in your packaging information. So either it is on the chemical container itself, or it could be provided with your shipping documents. I am not sure when they're going to start doing that. I know they have to have it done by the December, I believe the December 1st, 2015. So you could be seeing it. Some manufacturers may be starting it now, where others may delay a little bit. So you need to just look on your containers and in your shipping documentation. If after the 2015 date you don't have it, I would go to their website. Usually manufacturers will have them on their website, or of course you can always call them and get it from them.
Okay, I'm going to give everybody just a couple more seconds. Oh, here, I was just going to say, if you have any questions, if you could go ahead and put those in there, because we're going to be wrapping up soon, but I do have another one. Ted Stubbs wants to know, I was told you may have to ask for the SDA sheets. They are just required to make them available. Question mark.
That you're, I guess I don't understand, that you are required to ask for them?
Ted's question is, I was told you may have to ask for the SDS sheets. They are just required to make them available.
Well, the SDSs, they should provide you with the very first one. Just like any time your MSDS is changed or revised, they are required to send you one. So if someone's telling you that, I don't think that's quite right. They are required to send it to you.
Ted says thanks. So you've answered his question, Amy.
Okay.
Okay, it looks like all the questions have been answered at this time. We will be posting the video to our website soon, as well as, like Amy mentioned, all the attendees at today's webinar will be receiving an email with information of various things that you can upload, including that certificate. And just want to say, be sure to subscribe to our blog at westlerengineering.com. And thanks for joining us today. Have a great one.